be impactful, you're not going to touch on the very issues, because before you engage a process, you need to understand the modalities in there. And those bodies is part of the game plan, is a part of the process. So at the end of the day, you have these bodies convening all through the year. Convening, you've heard about the negotiation part of the convention. Negotiations. Now the technical work happens within those bodies. The other that is also scientific in nature, the component of the scientific and technology advancement is the IPCC. Anyone ever heard of that? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now this is a process of the framework within the convention that is charged with coming up with scientific research to inform where we are, where we have moved from. And I'm putting this in very basic terms because there are very technical terms that have been used within that context. And I encourage you to go ahead and revisit or interact with the different reports that the panel, the Intergovernmental Panel has come up with. There's already one for this year. And you know, the conversation about climate change at global level stems from there. There's a lot of reference that is keeping on being made to that report, to the different reports. Now we have the 6th report. So the 6th report will give you an updated version of where we are as a globally, in terms of the effects of climate change, how we are suffering, or rather, what is at stake, what should be anticipated in the future. And it spells out very scary, and I put in quotes scary, aspects of what is yet to happen. So the other component is the political one that I said, talked about earlier, the COP. So when the different bodies sit and do the groundwork, the science also do their groundwork. The COP is a place at which decisions are made. One may wonder what usually happens, what can happen within the 1 week or 2 that the COP usually takes. A lot of that is done in ascending order, and the entire process climaxes at the COP, because at the COP we have the politicians, we have the political heads making decisions on implementing programs and frameworks. Some of the frameworks, I will encourage you still to go ahead and interact with them. So basically that is how the entire conversation about the COP, the United Nations Convention Framework, is orchestrated. I was requested to talk about what happened for gender, and I think your next question will definitely lead us there. Thank you.
Yeah, before, I'll just speak a few, then we can move into the gender part. Speak a few things from what you've said. And you mentioned something that struck me, because I've always wondered that there is deliberate use of jargon that tends to keep some people out. And even as you're speaking, I'm like, this is a very elitist process. Yet the people who are being affected by the effects of climate change, when you start throwing terms like UNFCCC, COP, subsidiary committee, you will lose them. They will not listen. How do we make it less elitist? That's my first question. And maybe speak to how we also we leave Sharm el Sheikh, I hope I'm getting that right, and come back to Huisero, which is my hometown, to spread that message to the local man. Like, do we just go to Sharm el Sheikh, attend the meeting, some of the meetings, because some of them we are locked out, and then come back home and that's it, and do our reports and that's it? Or how do we make sure the local man, the very local villager, gets that? And then my third question is, listening to your journey, I'm really curious about how you get somebody to hold your hand. And I'm thinking about, again, that young person who is not funded, is just feels obliged to plant trees, to organize cleanup activities, to do brand audits, to do all these kinds of climate action. But they don't have somebody to hold their hand, so they don't have access to some of the spaces you may have had access to. Where do they start? So speak to those, and then we can go into gender.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. It is really interesting. When you talk about the jargon and the elitist elites, and the expert conversation, the conversation has been, painted or reflected to be, which it should not. I think is, like I said earlier, is political, and it reflects the very nature within which this conversation is happening and will continue to happen. I would like to state here that this space is contested. It has commercial, private interests. It has interest for society. Okay. It has political interests. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, you may like to understand, how do I get to this space? How do we get to this space? Mm-hmm. Now we get to this space from a point of rights, yeah? Mm-hmm. While the business people have their interests, the politicians have their interests, mm-hmm. we get to this space from a point of rights, yeah? It is within the convention, and I'll very frequently refer to it, there are principles. The principles of intergenerational justice, yeah? Mm-hmm. The principle of intergenerational justice that talks about the need for people, young people, who are going to be here beyond the current generation, and who are even anticipated to face more vulnerabilities. Because the future is, in as much as it's not known, at least the known speaks volumes, and negative ones for that matter. So which gives young people who are expected to be here longer the right to be at the table. Now, the rights are in their very nature supposed to be given, but they should also be contested. And you can only contest for those rights if you have the knowledge and the information requisite for you to challenge the system. So it's a system that you have to challenge. It's a system that you have to engage, and you have to engage from an informed point of view. So in as much as possible, the elitist conversation will take place, will continue happening. It challenges us, it poses a huge challenge for young people to understand the technical jargon, the technical aspects. Yes, it is made that way, but I think, and I must say personally, whenever I'm speaking, not even just to young people, I attempt as much as possible to break things down, to connect the jargon to reality. So I think it's one of those ways in which one can be able to bring the conversation down to the benefit of the people we work with. The other is that climate change is an elephant. It's like a huge elephant in the room, and each one of us is touching on it in their respective ways. Some are touching the thigh, others are touching the trunk, others are touching, the tail. And, we appreciate climate change and the effects of it from the point that in such a manner, the exposure we have to it is the way we interact with it, which still goes back to what I've just talked about. We need to challenge ourselves to go deeper mm-hmm. into reflecting on what this issue is and how we can be able to tackle it as individuals and as a collective, as a critical mass. Now, the holding hand, as you asked, I think it goes back to, still coils back to what I talked about. My personal experience, and I can share it here, was that I was seated in a lecture room, and there was this opportunity that ActionAid had, a campaign. Now I had colleagues also who are in the class. Now the opportunity was thrown to us as a class, and some of my colleagues were like, those things. Don't we find ourselves also in such a situation where you have peers, but they look at such things as, your things. So if they look at those things as your things, just imagine you're taking on the mantle. These things are sometimes not interesting, but again, for you to be able to engage the spaces, like I said earlier, you need to ground yourself into a point of knowledge. Yeah? Now, and the interest I've had, and I'm really very interested in the young people that shared earlier today, that I'm ready to do this. I am ready to champion this. I'm ready to be a champion. I do this. So the small initiatives that we do definitely attract partnerships, attract people to help us. I had somebody here who is mentored by my good friend Jackson at Oxfam. I think that way you need to do something for you to be recognized, for you to be appreciated, for you, and it doesn't come handy. It's a journey on which we should not tire. Even where I am today, definitely I have people to hold my hand. So it doesn't stop. The journey keeps on rolling. You just have to ground yourself, be present and interested in participating in the ongoing processes.
Yeah, thank you. Let's clap for her for just that, really. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience based on what she's shared so far. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think very interesting insights on the whole COP process and the climate change broadly. I think one of the issues that I'd be interested in you speaking to is, because of the very complex nature of the process as you have described, isn't it important also to have points of specialization? So in terms of individual interests or organizational interests, because it's such a broad area as has been described, isn't it important that one really hones their skills and specializes in particular areas so that you fully understand that particular area and contribute significantly to discussion in that area? So that's one of the issues I was thinking about, your perspectives on specialization. The other issues in terms of the technical nature of the discourse. And I think with many of these processes, that is something that we have to be cognizant of. Because when you talk about scientific processes, there's going to be technical nature of discourse. When you talk about the various international negotiations around specific issues, there's going to be technical discourse. So I think it's something that we need to be aware of, and we just have to keep learning to ensure that we keep up to date with that nature of the technical discourse. However, from that perspective, I think the issue you raise about linking that, bridging that technical language with the reality is very important, and maybe that's where we also have a very important role to play from a civil society perspective in terms of ensuring that those issues that are discussed of a technical nature are reflected in the communities in which we work and those whom we engage with, and then the issues that emerge from those are also reflected in the technical discourse. So ensuring that there is a bridge between the two. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you got that. Just before, let's see if there's another question from the audience, and then you can respond to all questions. Anybody else with a question? Great. You can take that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jen, for that question and reflections. I would like to still reiterate further on especially the linkage. Linking global discussions and processes to our very day-to-day realities. And I think at the end of the day is the only thing we should be able to look out from these processes. Because when you look at it, I talked about it as a contested space. Now this space is one where each stakeholder, participant in that space comes with an interest. Now the understanding of the realities that we go through on a daily as young people, as communities, is one of our challenges. Because before we even do that, it's a prerequisite for us to challenge the system. It's going to be one of our win within the conversation. Because for us to impact, for us to find something to benefit from that conversation going, and I think I should have talked about the benefits. At the global level, what is contested for is resources, finances, technology transfer, resources to be able, for example, for Uganda as part of other, and part of Africa and other least developed countries, is to have the finances and technology for us to be able to stay resilient in an ever-changing climate. So for us to be able to attract those resources, we need to be grounded on what is happening on ground. We usually fall victim of the people that are on the table. How is there's been this trend of making the process look like it should be experts to engage that space. And there's also an assumption that nothing is happening down there on the front lines of the effects of climate change. Yet there's a lot that is happening in terms of people, communities adapting in their own way. And those stories of adaptation, stories of how people are contributing to emission reduction, is something that we can take to the table. And like Jen said, we can only engage that space meaningfully if we reflect the need. So reflecting what is the challenge on the ground is one way of us saying, look here, these resources are available or availed. They can go to this to support such initiatives that are happening on the ground. So that's the linkage. Otherwise, you can get lost in the technicalities, in the politics and the science, if you do not really take cognizance of that. The other is a specialization, and I think you're right. There's a lot. The elephant is huge. You need to find your niche. What is it that you can contribute to? Yeah. There's been a lot of initiatives, at least I can speak for Uganda, and I know across the region, the Heka region, you'll have realized that there's a lot of tree planting happening. But personally, I think we have done very well in that area. We need to get down to do the analysis. Can tree planting help address our incomes, livelihoods at the end of the day? Will tree planting, for example, address our energy aspects? So we need to have on our fingertips what is it that our communities need for us to be able to meaningfully impact this conversation, but also be able to contribute to the ongoing conversation and also to reap from the resources that are right there. So specialization is some key takeaway that you can have, at least out of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you briefly talk about the gender aspect of COP27 and how we can connect climate change and gender justice?
Okay, moderator, I just wanted to come in briefly before Miriam can talk about the gender issue, to just add something on specialization to answer Jenny's question. Yeah, like Miriam has indicated, indeed, the discussion is technical and very complex. And so what has happened is that countries have decided to implement the specialization component that you were talking about, where engagements or discussions have been cascaded down into different thematics, where we have a group of people identified by the climate department to concentrate on adaptation, for example, because adaptation on its own is also very technical. So they are specialized people that talk about adaptation. And so how do we fit in as a society to fit into those specializations? The second one is on adaptation, on mitigation. Mitigation is very technical. There's a technical team that is handling mitigation. There is capacity building, which is another area that is also being tackled. Technology, like she talked about it. What type of technology transfer do we want to see happening at this level? Then there is the gender component, which is going to talk about in details. There is a group that is discussing loss and damage specifically. So that's the specialization that we're talking about. And then financing. So that's how specialized the engagements around COP, around climate change, are being, specialized. And so for us to, as civil society, I think we need, again, to take that as an influencing agenda. How do we influence our governments to ensure that those technical sessions are all inclusive and that they are actually done on time before COP happens? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackson, for that addition. We appreciate it. Just quickly, talking about the connection. Yeah, the connecting gender justice to climate justice.
Another question?
Oui, je suis contente que les gens... le nom c'est...
Can we have some interpretation gear for us here, please? Yeah, or can they move? Or if somebody speaks both French and English and can...
No, it's okay.
Ok, je disais que je suis contente qu'on relève la question des liens pour les jeunes, mais je voudrais insister aussi que, comme nous sommes ici pour aider les jeunes, il faut qu'on les aide à comprendre aussi pour le besoin de plaidoyer, les différences et les spécificités pour chaque pays, pour permettre à ces jeunes de faire pas un plaidoyer isolé, mais un plaidoyer régional ou sous-régional. Parce que pour les jeunes qui viennent de la RDC, par exemple, je dirais que les jeunes qui ont moins de 25 ans, qui viennent de la RDC, leur priorité ne serait pas, par exemple, le changement climatique. Leur priorité serait seulement la guerre. Parce qu'on peut soit mourir de sécheresse, soit mourir d'inondation, mais on peut aussi, d'un jour à l'autre, mourir par une balle. Et les liens entre changement climatique et la situation des femmes, c'est ça qu'il faut mettre en évidence. Vous savez que la RDC est parmi le pays qui a le plus grand nombre de déplacés internes. Et parmi les déplacés internes, je crois que c'est près de 5 millions de personnes. 51% de cette population est la population féminine. Donc les femmes, aujourd'hui, leur priorité, ce n'est pas le changement climatique. Et alors qu'au même moment, on dit que la RDC est un pays solution, vu la forêt, vu les ressources en eau, mais est-ce que notre plaidoyer va dans le sens d'aider les jeunes à faire ces différents liens entre la situation des femmes, entre les conflits et les changements climatiques, parce que les jeunes se retrouvent au milieu, eux, ils ont l'avenir devant eux, et comment on les aide à faire ces plaidoyers pour que quand les différents dirigeants des pays africains prennent des décisions, qu'ils pensent à ces jeunes filles, qu'ils pensent à ces jeunes garçons, qu'ils pensent à ces enfants qui ont l'avenir devant eux, qui doivent trouver toutes ces solutions difficiles par rapport à leur existence. Merci.
Okay. I'll quickly respond to just that has been asked or reflected. You talk about very good aspects of conflict, realities that are happening within your community. In your reflection or out of your observation, it is conflict that you see in Congo, where you come from, for example. But again, you also talk about a very critical aspect, which is linkages. Perhaps the conflict that is in Congo has a bearing on how climate change is affecting life in Congo. You talked about Congo having water, a place that has rain and water. Could it be a cross-border or cross-community aspect that is bringing about conflict? So I think it still goes back to what needs to be done. As a young person, we need to make those linkages, yeah, those connections. Climate change is being talked about and the environment has been highlighted, but then how does it link to the problem that you see happening on ground in your community? So it's just an assumption. I am not privy to the conflict that you're actually talking about, but I highly suspect there's a connectivity of what is happening with your environment. It may not be Congo, but probably the neighbors. So at the end of the day, I think we need to have that frame of mind while we're addressing such development issues. The other is the collective that you're calling upon, the collective action. Yes, we come to such spaces coming from different realities. The reality from Congo is like you have presented it. From Ethiopia, it could be different. From Tanzania, from Kenya, it could still be different, or Tanzania, or any other part of the world. But you come together as a critical mass. That's what I want to believe today, that we are here to share experiences of climate change as we know it, as we experience it, and how can we work out solutions as a collective to engage the global space. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Edwin Mohomuza from Youth Go Green, Uganda. Karibu sana, Edwin. That means welcome. Briefly, before we come to you, Edwin, I will ask Miriam to just connect gender to climate justice.
Okay, I'm told, thank you so much. I'm told the presentation is going to be reflected, but even when it's not yet now, I can speak to the fact that it comes along with, there's a history to gender being discussed within the convention, within the global discourse, and it comes from a realization that that gender equality is essential. It has globally been agreed upon. There's consensus that gender equality is essential for development, but essential for harmonious living as well. And as part of the history, it comes from a process and a global process or global realization that stems way back to 1992, the Rio Summit, Rio Convention on Development that I talked about earlier. It still also has a bearing on what happens within the global convenings. When the world at some point agreed to come to tackle aspects of development as a whole, there are issues that were agreed upon, climate change and environment being one of them, but also gender equality as another, very critical. So I think the presentation is not going to be, will it be reflected? So I have been requested to talk to you about the feedback from SB 15. SB, simply put, is subsidiary body convening. So, like I said earlier, these bodies do form part of the entire process of negotiation, are part of the convention. I know the convention was given a background earlier as one of the conversations that we've had until today, but just to reiterate and for emphasis purposes, the convention is also a product of that global convening where the world decided to look at climate change, environment, and development, sustainability as a whole, but also giving it importance. So within the convention, I have already talked about the bodies, and the bodies have been convening, meeting for the last 56 times. They have sessions, they are called intersessions within the entire negotiation process. I talked about the COP as being the political and decision-making body within that context. So the SBI 56 sat in Germany, Bonn, this year. And for gender, there were very critical aspects that were talked about. Mm-hmm. Now the history to this convening stems way back, like I said, in 1995. Some of you could have heard about the Beijing Declaration that talks about the importance of having gender equality as part of development, that recognizes that half of the world population, which is women, should, and the contributions they are continually making, first of all, are affected and proportionally by the effects of climate change, but also are making very critical contributions as individuals. Okay, so. Where is that? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, so I was trying to give a summary, and like I've been requested, I think I'm going to summarize this in very, very limited words, but but ones that will allow us to really follow through. So I was talking about the recognition of gender and the need to have an equal representation, participation for both men and women, and the contributions that women keep on making in their different ways. So the gender conversation within the convention is specifically to ensure two aspects. One, improving gender balance within the climate change agenda. Secondly is to increase awareness and for support for effective implementation, and effective in the sense that it's the initiatives addressing the effects of climate change or responding to the effects are gender responsive. So I talked about the declaration, the Beijing Declaration. Secondly, in that order, at some point, the Economic and Social Council or Commission on the Status of Women also had convened in that order in 2000, in 2000, 5 years after the Beijing Declaration. There was a review of the declaration and the activities it spells out to address the issues. In 2001, there was a Marrakesh United Nations Climate Change Conference that still was working out, had convened to evaluate the level of implementation, what are some of the challenges. Now, going through that chronology, you realize that there's been emphasis on the importance of having gender equality within the conversations, but also to have gender equality at programming, at policy level, policy implementation, policy formulation, and implementation of various programs meant for climate change, for addressing climate change. Fast forward, in summary, of course I know you'll go through those details. There's a lot of conversations that are behind these, those summarized points. In 2019, at the COP25, there were very critical achievements that were made in the gender constituency. At that point, the Gender Action Plan was concluded and agreed upon and recognized within the convention. Unfortunately, a year after COVID, it's within that period that COVID-19 happened, and so not so much work was done then in terms of follow-up. At COP25, there were measures that were improvised for the continuation of the conversation and the actions on ground, but most of them were offline. Sorry, they were online. So the Secretariat, in one or the other, in Bonn, the UNFCCC Secretariat, UNFCCC's United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, improvised to have virtual conversations to further the conversation. Now, and of course the objective was to ensure that the Gender Action Plan, the Gender Action Plan is some framework or plan and process that I encourage you to interact with, because when we talk about participation, like I said earlier, all the aspects of participation for gender, for men and women, are enshrined in there. So I encourage you to interact very much with it. At COP26, parties were invited to give a recap, an evaluation of how implementation is being done in their different countries, how things are happening. Of course, the plan spells out actions, 5 critical areas of action, and we may not go through them here, but at some point, in part, they talk about how women can be able to participate at different levels and how they can be supported to do so, capacity building, ensuring that women have representation during the COP and the relevant other processes, the Kyoto Protocol, the convention itself, and the COP. Yeah, so the other aspect to gender is that parties were requested to submit the progress report that I've talked about. At COP26 also, the Secretariat requested parties to submit a report in that line, a synthetic report, one that goes deeper in reflecting what is happening, for example, for Uganda. Unfortunately, it's just 18 countries that were able to submit on deadline those reports. And I think as we go on, we shall look at who did and who did not. I'm sure Uganda as a country, we are yet to prepare ours. The process goes on. So essentially, what happened at SBI was to have a review, the review of how implementation is being done. How has the implementation of the Gender Action Plan impacted the participation of women or the capacity building for women? And the process is still ongoing, but what is phenomenal that needs to be talked about here is the fact that that process succeeded to be on the agenda of the next COP in Egypt. And I think that's a plus for the gender constituency. The report will be shared, and the report will be shared and discussed and negotiated within the COP. And probably in terms of what we here should be able to engage with is to go back and look at exactly what some countries, your country, has submitted as implementation. Now, at that point, I think we can seek for accountability, because you being on the ground and the front lines of the effects of climate change, at some point you know what has happened and probably what has not. So an evaluation, your own evaluation, and so you can be able to engage. Lastly, are the opportunities to engage for young people is to capacity build, and capacity build. The other is to follow up to ensure implementation of the participation that I've talked about. On the part of governments, I think there's need to implement the Gender Action Plan at national level, particularly supporting the focal points. Honorable Masiko Winnie is our focal point person for gender here in Uganda, and of course was supposed to make this presentation, I am told. But I think what she's always, and I would like to reflect this because it's something that she has always talked about, the issue of facilitating the focal points. The focal points are charged with implementing the Gender Action Plan, but for that to happen, there has to be facilitation, and at national level, that should be taken care of. Lastly, is to ensure a balance of participation for stakeholders. We're talking about women, but the men will also complain at some point. So a balance in terms of having very specific statistics on how many men and women are participating, I think is something that...
thank you so much, Miriam.
Yes, so thank you.
Yeah, you've given us some really good insights, and clearly there's a lot to learn from you, just that the time is not on our side. I hope you can be available for us to consult you in person throughout the day. Yeah, so just getting a quick note there that Miriam will be available for us to reach out to her. We have a gentleman who joined us, and he has some very interesting information for us. But before we go to him, I would want us to do a quick Energizer. Any volunteers for an Energizer? Oh, I'm going to pick you, by the way, if you don't volunteer. Thank you. Yeah, can you all stand up? There's tea for those who stand up in good time. I'm taking note.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. It's great to be here again. I'm Beverly, just a reminder, a poet as well. Here's the Energizer. I use this a lot in my trainings. So with your, this is my left, so this will probably be your right. Just turn it this way. Imagine you're swimming, the front crawl
Thanks so much, Beverly. I see some of us have earned their tea. Some of you have not, and have taken note. So, Edwin, you have 5 minutes. Tell us about yourself, the work that you do, and then your engagement with COP26 in 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I hope it's on. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be seated among the ladies, and it's an opportunity that I'm even at the end. So they always need protection, and I'm actually on their right. So it is a great opportunity. That's just a joke. It's also an Energizer. My name is Edwin Humza. I am one of the national youth leaders in the country. I'm one of the climate champions, and we call ourselves these days climate activists. But I'm happy that I've been leading a large network of young people in the climate change space. And I'm working with the youth organization that we founded in 2014, and that's the Youth Go Green, which is registering membership of close to 1 million youth across the country, but also with different engagements in other African countries like Ghana, Nigeria, for those who are around. I'll let you know the contact persons in these countries, Burkina Faso, and in our East African region. I'm also one of the youth representatives of Uganda to the UN. I have been representing the youth in most of the UN General Assembly engagements, the ECOSOC Youth Forum, the CSW, and other engagements. I have been in the climate change space for some time now, and I've been driven by passion. And that's it. My first degree is not even in environment, climate change, or anything that I sing about these days, but I have been very passionate about issues of climate change. And I don't want to give experiences of how Uganda feels about climate change impacts, but it's huge. It's so much. I always say that climate change does actually not segregate. It doesn't know whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or anything, or a bishop or a pastor or a minister or anything, poor, rich, anything. As long as the flood finds you in its way, it will take you. No matter your profile, no matter your age. But what is challenging and what is very perturbing is the fact that there are most groups which are vulnerable to climate change. There are some groups which are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and these are children and women. That is the reason we sometimes get our voices high. It's the reason we speak loud. It's the reason we want to find space. It's the reason we actually fight for platforms of this nature. In government, in civil society, in countries. I have been lucky that I have been one of the official youth delegates of this country to the COPs. Many of you know what we call the COP, Conference of the Parties. Since COP27, that was in Paris, from Paris to Marrakesh, from Marrakesh to Germany, from Germany, I think, to Poland, from Poland, Glasgow last year, now Egypt. And I have been privileged to engage with my other African youth leaders in the region. And we have realized that we have a common goal that we must achieve. And I'm happy that even governments, especially the UNFCCC Secretariat and other world leaders, have realized the role of youth in the climate action. They have realized that we have a very big stake in the climate change processes. And I'm very happy that the UNFCCC, the world leaders, gave us the space in the negotiations. The Paris Agreement, for some of you who are very familiar with it, it spells out the constituencies, the groups that must participate and give innovative solutions to the other negotiations. Women constituency, they are there. That's why you find them that they have actually, my colleague Miriam here, that we have always gone to COP together. They have the gender component. One of the thematic areas for the negotiations is on climate change and gender. The youth, we also have our constituency, which is the children and youth constituency, Yango, for those who are familiar with it. And it is this space that we normally use to at least have our governments accountable for their actions they do in terms of finding solutions to climate change. In Uganda here, we have been very lucky that at least our government somehow listens, though sometimes they don't take action where we recommend or make recommendations. I'm very, very, very confident about this, and I can tell you the truth. We have the climate change policy, we have the strategy, we have the bill, which is now a law, but the level of engagement for the youth is minimal, where we want to make sure that we do this. Climate change actions are mainly, by the way, implemented by the young people. I want to assure you this. Right now, as I speak, there are a group of youth who are probably in a forest. They are cutting down trees to make charcoal and make a living out of it. But they are the same who have the energy, the determination, the focus to regenerate some of these natural resources which have been degraded. The other day we watched, some of you could have watched in Uganda, you could have watched a news story where government was evicting some of the people who were operating in a wetland along the northern bypass, the refugee wetland. And you could see that they are the only youth who were there. Most of them below the age of 35, but also women. Women. So that is critical for us. I'm happy that some of the development partners, like Oxfam, is convening such a very powerful engagement for the African youth, especially the ladies, the young ladies. I want us to give them a round of applause. I can tell you that some of us take these engagements for granted, but we learn a lot. We share experiences. We share knowledge. We share the pain of climate change impacts. We share ideas and the solutions. I'm concluding. And I'm happy Oxfam and other development partners are giving us the chance. My only request would be that as you go back to your countries, respective country, the ladies that have gotten an opportunity to be in this engagement, don't close the notebooks where you wrote the ideas. Don't, I request you, and I repeat again, don't close your notebooks. In fact, when you get there, get your notebooks, look at the points that you've made, that you learned from Uganda and other African countries, create concepts and proposals of the actions that you can do. Number two, continue to hold dialogues, forums, and engagements. Continue to network. Continue to knock on the doors of the development partners and your governments. One day they will listen to you. One day they will know the value of your energy. Friends, I want to request Oxfam that can we convene these engagements annually? Can we have a rotational kind of arrangement in most of the African countries? And by the way, as I conclude, can we also have a male, I repeat, the young boys, I repeat, Oxfam, can you also engage the little boys who also are suffering the impacts of climate change, have their own dialogue? We have supported the girl child. We have empowered the girl child. That the boy child is missing out a little bit. And can we have this kind of a conversation again with them? I want us to have a very clear position from this conference or this convening, that they may still communicate or position includes the following. One, having regional feminist climate change dialogues every year. Number two, actions that we have shared here, initiatives that we have shared here, as I come closer to you to give you the microphone, can we also make sure that whatever we have discussed here is shared during the COP27? I am one of those who will struggle to go to Egypt, and I will make sure that with my other African youth leaders, whatever conversations we have had here, we'll be able to present them during COP27.
Powerful.
And
Let's
lastly,
clap for him.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for being stubborn. But this is how we creatively engage ourselves as young people. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you for sharing your perspectives as a youth who has engaged in the Youth UN summits, particularly the COP. Thanks to our panelists. This has really been an engaging session, and we've learned lots. And just like I said for Miriam, I hope, Edwin, too, you can be available for us to consult you further, because clearly there's still more we need to hear from your end and from your experience. We value you taking time to join us, so we thank you so much. I stand to be guided. Do we go for break, then come back?
Okay, let's applaud our facilitator of this session.
Louder.
Yes, louder. She's really done well. And let us clap for my good friend Miriam. And also my very good friend Edwin. I know we could do better, and even we could talk and talk, except that we are just behind schedule, and you've given us really very good updates in regards to participation and how the young people can get on board. But besides that, consensus. Now, me and my co-facilitator are going to agree. We have this session on connecting national actions with COP27, and we have tea. So, we have to agree whether we take 15 minutes in the room, then break for tea, or break for tea and then return. What's the consensus?
Wow.
Break for tea and then return. Okay, our timekeeper is around. How long must our tea take? How about if we did it this way? Some of you were saying you want to explore Kampala a little bit more before you return tomorrow. So the more we stay in the room, the more you want to explore Kampala. And we are very hospitable people. So what we are going to do, can you pick your tea and come and take while we continue with our presentations?
Yes.
Is that fine? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
By show of hands, the ayes have it. So we are going to continue with the session. You want tea, you just step out, pick, and come back inside. Thank you so much. Our next presentation is within 15 minutes so that we go to the next item. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yes, please grab your tea and come and sit down. Thank you.
Be vocal, be heard, be seen. That way, you will ensure that your impact is penetrating into those offices and into those places that you want to influence. Thank you.
I agree with everything that Judy has mentioned, and personally, there were times that I felt like I do not belong in a room, or I do not belong in a place that, you know, I just entered, and because also I'm new to it, and maybe because I'm young, or because I'm a woman. And imposter syndrome is real when you're young, especially a young woman. There were times where I've entered different offices, like governmental offices, big businesses, and really, you know, elite spaces where I have to speak on different issues regarding to environment and climate change. And a lot of the times these rooms are filled with older men, and you feel kind of like you don't belong there. And there were times where I felt that way, but I kept going. And even though there are times I still feel that way, I still keep going, especially when it started, Green Ethiopia started around 2 years ago, and I was still a university student. So I kept doubting myself that, you know, what I was doing was relevant enough, if it was relevant at all even. And a lot of the times, you know, it will take us a long time for these rooms to be filled with young women or young people in general. And it's something that's normal. It's something that, like, will keep on happening. For example, it's not just imposter syndrome. There are times where, for example, the environmental problems in Ethiopia are kind of seen as a luxury problem. Like, if you speak about environmental issues, it's kind of, you're seen as if you're caring about something that's not relevant enough, because people will bring up conflict and other ethnic violence, for example, that's happening in the country. That is, if we really think about it, the root would be, you know, climate change, and the root would be use of natural resources. But a lot of people would, when you're speaking about environmental problems, they don't really encourage you. And that's also another thing that I face. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? We'll take a quick question or two. Nice.
Okay, thank you so much, moderators. Maybe I will ask El Shaddai. We want to know how your organization is actually engaging, especially the young girls, in climate spaces. What kind of programs, interventions are you promoting in your country? What opportunities do you present to them? And where do you see your organization, say, championing the agenda of your organization in other African countries? Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you got that. Any other questions? Wow, I'm about to start a fire. Any other question? Great. So she'll take that question, and then we can.
Yes. So engaging young women or young people in general is very important. And one of the ways that we engage people, for example, we were involved with YWCA, Young Women's Christian Association, about a year ago, which was giving trainings on gender and climate change, and trying to find young women in different areas at universities or schools that were highly involved in different things, but to bring them together to train them on how Ethiopian women and African women are highly affected and vulnerable to the climate crisis. And this training, I was involved in it, and then as a group, the people who were involved, the first batch that was taking the training, then went ahead to give training to more women. So in this way, we were able to give these girls a volunteering experience for events that we had, also tell other women who are, who did not get education or are in different neighborhoods, to tell them about what climate change means just from the start, and how it will affect them and how it does affect them right now. And in the future, how we would like to engage them is through capacity building and by educating them, definitely, and urging the government to include climate science and climate change as a big, someone mentioned it earlier actually, as a big education part in the curriculum so that women can actually learn about this, and also by pushing women and girls in rural areas to go to school so that they can learn about this. And for Africa, in the future, we also want to collaborate with other organizations that are existing in Africa, such as Youth Go Green. I actually, before I came to this conference, I was not aware of it, but after talking to Edwin, we are looking to collaborate more, to have more young people in Ethiopia also involved as a collaborative effort in the country as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. A round of applause for our panelists. Just hold your applause.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to, probably there could be organizations in here that would like to probably understand how you can be a UNFCCC observer or take part in the negotiations and in the activities that happen here. Or probably we are so lucky that everybody here is an accredited COP attendant. Are you all? Okay, I think I'll be sharing something that could probably be shared on the WhatsApp group. I just received that message this week while I was here, and it is the application for COP26, because the deadline is always August, so the deadline is 31st of August, but the requirements are everything that you have, I believe, so it will be easy, but it's also important to note that it's possible to also be a participant in these spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, El Shaddai. Let's clap for them. Loud. Some of you are not clapping, and that's rude. Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been great. Again, we'll still reach out to you because we recognize the resources that you are for us as young people. So a quick summary of the past 2 sessions we've had. We've been told a lot to go and read. One document that has stood out for me is the Gender Action Plan. So if you are in the room, make time to go look through that, the Kyoto Protocol, the COP processes. In case something missed you, just go and read. Keep moving has been emphasized. There's going to be obstacles coming your way, but keep moving. And then link your local actions to the global thinking and processes such as COP26. So thanks for listening, and I wish you a good remainder of sessions. My name is Christine Sayo.
Let us just say woo to Christine. Thank you. Clap for her. Mumupigie makopi. Na balikuwa panelists tubapigie makopi sana. Okay, now those who don't know Kiswahili don't even know what I'm saying. They didn't clap. So like I said, let us clap for all the panelists that we had. Thank you so much, and I know we are progressing well with our tea. Before we invite the next panel here, and the lead facilitator for that panel, we have received someone very important in this room. Aren't you excited? And that is none other than Honorable Christine Kaya. I will introduce her appropriately when her time comes, but Honorable, you're most welcome. She's one person I've known for the last many years who is too passionate. Even in Parliament, all our debates are on climate change. And in fact, I will talk much about her and relating her to climate change. Right now, having even the climate change policy, that is Act of Parliament, it is her brain. She's among those who are the brainchild of that policy. So kudos for her. So Honorable Christine, you're most welcome, and feel free to associate with us, the young people who are in this room, and also share ideas. So right now, I would like us to put our hands together as we welcome none other than Patricia Morozi, who is going to be our facilitator for the next session. Please clap for her. That gives her energy to start. Thank you so much. And Patricia, you're free to know how to moderate this session, but I'll be coming in case you don't keep time. I'll be coming in, but I know the way I look at you, you're going to keep time. So please, you're most welcome, and the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Patricia Morozi from Akina Mama wa Africa, and I'll be moderating the panel on the intersections of unpaid care work, domestic work, gender-based violence, conflict, and women's leadership. So I'd like to invite our panelists to join us here at the front, if you may. Mary Fatia, Florina Nefisa Yusuf, Esther Namboka, and Pereth Niwahereza. Please join us at the front. So I would like to welcome our panelists and ask them to introduce themselves. Since we've been here for 3 days and I assume we all know each other, so maybe just your name and then a fun fact about you in a few seconds.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. My name is Esther Namboka, and I'm the Executive Director of Girls Forum International, and also partners with the Uganda Women's Network, and we implement unpaid care and domestic work in Kampala, though unpaid care and domestic work is also carried out in Gulu. Thank you very much.
Good morning, all of you. My name is Nafisa Yusuf. I'm the Executive Director of NEGAD. NEGAD is a nationwide women network in my country, and we are partner with Oxfam and FEMNET for the climate justice.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Fatia. I work for Young Women's Christian Association of South Sudan as the program manager. Thank you.
Greetings to you all. My name is Pereth Niwahereza. I work with Uganda Women's Network as the program officer. Thank you.
Yes, so we're going to begin by speaking about unpaid care work and its intersections with climate change. So yesterday we spoke extensively about how the impacts of climate change are gendered. So to put things in context, I'll give a brief statistic from the International Labour Organization report on care work and the future of decent work. So according to that report, globally women perform 76.2% of the total hours of unpaid care work, which is more than 3 times as much as men. And other studies have shown that the global monetary value of unpaid care and domestic work is above 10.8 trillion United States dollars. So could you tell us, could you speak more about why tackling the exploitation and the undervaluation of women's work should be put in conversations about climate justice? Could Pereth Niwahereza take us through that? And Esther Namboka.
All right, thank you, moderator. I want to first explain a linkage between unpaid care and domestic work and climate change. Uganda, we are currently implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, And we all know that SDG 5 focuses on the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, while SDG 13 focuses on taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So how do these two interlink? You realize that SDG 5 intersects with SDG 3 in a way that it brings about the reflection on how women and girls are involved in any climate change action. Yeah. What is climate change anyway? We look at the long-term shifts in temperature, weather patterns, and these are kind of attributed to human activities and natural factors. And these manifest in landslides. We usually have droughts in Uganda, floods, and all these bring about displacement of people. Yeah, displacement of people. We have hunger, and then we have violence, because when we have floods and then gardens are washed away, people lose their crops, so that results into hunger. And then because we know women are the people who provide food, and then when there is hunger and you're not able to provide food on the table, then you're attributed to violence by your husband and your children. They will come to you and they'll be like, we need food, and there is no way how you can get food when floods actually washed away your gardens. So Uganda is among the countries really that experience these significant impacts of climate change. We have drops in water levels. Yeah, okay. So all these effects fall on women, because these are the women who interact more with environment. Yeah. So the climate change effects are so adverse, and they affect women in their care work because they constantly interact with the environment. For instance, when they're looking for firewood and there is no way how they can find firewood because the trees were cut down, the trees were cut down and they cannot find firewood, and so they need to find firewood to make a meal in their homes. They need to walk a million miles of distances to look for water, and they cannot find water because of climate change. They need to go to the gardens to do agriculture, and they cannot do it because they were displaced. They have nowhere to practice agriculture from. And all these fall on women, and they increase a lot of care work on their shoulders. So it is really so unfortunate that women are the people who are most affected by climate change, more so here in Uganda. And they are less economically empowered because they will not have access to natural resources, which are economic resources. Yeah, so that is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My colleague has mentioned about the effects of climate change on unpaid care. But I want to build on her point that even unpaid care has a direct effect on climate change. So Pereth just mentioned about how the women go to fetch firewood. But what happens when they go to fetch the firewood? They cut down the trees. So there is a direct link, there's a direct intersectionality between these two conversations. So as we talk about how climate change will force a woman to walk miles and miles to look for water, or fail to put a meal on the plate just because the land is no longer productive. It's also important that we mention about how some of these unpaid care activities are directly affecting the climate change. So there's need to also engage the women themselves. Uganda, over 80% of the rural is employed in agriculture. So as we are having the conversation on how climate change needs to be mitigated, we also need to rally populations, especially women, on how they need to adapt to technology or agri-tech kind of a means to curb climate change, and also to join the voices that are talking about climate change in the different spaces. Unfortunately, this educational awareness is very less in the communities. Look at the women who have to go and make firewood. We are all making, all of us here are using charcoal stoves. All of us need the charcoal. Actually, if you don't have charcoal in your homes, your unpaid care is going to be affected. So you may not be able to put a meal on the plate. So, and at the end of the day, there is GBV. The man will come and ask, where is food? How come there's no food on the plate? So, so there is a very direct intersection between these two, and it's very, very important, moderator, that we have most of these rural communities, and especially the women who are involved in agriculture, to have or to be part of these conversations. I would have been happy to see actually a rural woman in this space, in this discussion, on this platform, even on this panel. So, but these are some of the lessons that we have to put. We need to see school-going students as well. We need the curriculum so that our school-going children start learning about environmental conservation from childhood. So if we can have this taken further to the rural communities, I'm sure that we shall be able to curb climate change and negative effects, and also reduce the unpaid care and domestic work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To add on that, actually, in 2021, UNESCO called for environmental education to be a core curriculum component in all countries by 2025, which shows us the important role of education in addressing the impacts of climate change, especially on women and girls, who are the most vulnerable in the communities. So I think we can move on to the intersection between climate change and conflict. I would like to give a few examples. More than half of the people affected by fighting in northern Ethiopia are women, and 48% are children. Also, South Sudan has experienced widespread seasonal flooding for 5 consecutive years, displacing over 500,000 people. So, Florina and Mary, could you tell us more about the impact of climate change and conflict to women's leadership? And is there any impact at all, if any? Could you explain to us those linkages?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Florine Kazara, je suis coordonnatrice de Congo Compétences avec les jeunes. Alors, pour le cas de notre pays, je crois que
Yes. Can I go on?
Je crois que le conflit ne laisse pas trop de choix face au changement climatique, parce que la majorité de la population vit de l'agriculture. Et lorsqu'il y a conflit, ils sont obligés de quitter leur domicile ou leur village. Et quand ils se déplacent, ils laissent leurs champs et peuvent se réfugier dans un coin où il n'y a pas assez où la terre n'est pas fertile. Et là, ils sont victimes de famine et autre chose. Alors, c'est plus les femmes et les enfants qui sont victimes.
Yeah. Can I go on? Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mary once again from South Sudan. So for those of you who have been in South Sudan, you might have experienced the heat that is very high, and it can really lead to serious drought that is really burning out crops and also affecting livestock and making people to shift from one location to another, whereby when the cattle keepers move from one location to another, it also causes conflict, because they are going to affect people's homes, destroy people's crops with the animals. So serious effect also on the communities, causing intercommunal conflict. And again, when we now cry for rain and serious flood keeps coming, so it's the climate is just real in South Sudan, because when it floods, it really affects serious destruction of, and women are the most affected because they will lose everything that they have, and they just, some people even die, and children, and including all properties. So women are the most affected in terms of GBV, and also children, especially school-going girls, are the people who cannot continue anymore with their education. So in that means that they will not be educated, and they will not even know about climate, and they will not be engaged in terms of leadership. So that is why so many women in South Sudan still do not understand what climate change is. It is because they have been affected so many times, and they do not even get the opportunity to learn or to understand what the climate change is, and how they can be able to really mitigate it. Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad that you've spoken about the displacement of women and girls when these disasters hit, and how it makes them more vulnerable, especially when you are now in need of aid, because in January 2021 or 22, there were accusations against aid workers who were soliciting sex in exchange for basic necessities like food and pads and just simple things like that. And anytime that there is sex through coercion, that's rape. So we see how even when people are displaced, women and girls are displaced, they become more vulnerable to sexual and gender-based violence. So that's why it's important to address these intersections of SGBV and climate change.
Yes.
So additionally, I wanted you to talk about climate justice and women's leadership. We know that only 1/3 of leadership positions in climate change negotiations are held by women. And if we go into the specifics of how many of those are African, then the situation is even much worse. So can you tell us how crucial is young women's participation in these climate spaces to addressing the crisis?
Yeah, I think young women are the most affected in this, and they have to be the ones to go actually and participate and tell the true story from their perspective, how it is affecting them, rather than someone talking on their behalf, because it will then not be a true story, and then they will not be taken serious. So it is important that young women take up their spaces and participate, and it should be meaningful participation rather than just bringing someone on board and sitting and even without saying anything or contributing to anything during the discussion. So it's really, and we have experienced a lot of this, that young women go to spaces, global spaces, and don't do anything apart from sleeping in hotels, maybe doing all the hashtags and all the selfies, but don't really participate. So all we want is the participation of young women, so that we are the ones who are facing all the challenges, the impact of climate change. So we are the ones who need to tell the story, and we are the ones also who have the solutions, because we will be able to know which kind of solutions we really want. So it's important that young women take up the positions, so at all levels and in all countries. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before Joella comes in to talk about conflict and climate change, when you talked about young women's participation, I also think it's important to highlight how when young women become visible in these spaces where we are fighting against environmental degradation, it also puts them more at risk for violence against women, which is why we shall discuss sexual and gender-based violence shortly. But I would like to talk about a few human rights defenders who have lost their lives in this fight. Kenyan human rights defender and environmental activist Elizabeth Ekaru, who was murdered under suspicious circumstances, is also an example of the price that women who make this work visible, women who call out these abuses and violations of our land, it puts them at risk. And so it's important that while we platform these young women to speak about these issues, we need to build a strong feminist solidarity and a strong movement that is going to protect every single person in these spaces, because no one should lose their lives fighting for the planet and fighting for us. And you see the war against the planet, because it is in fact a war against the earth, it's going to use the same tactics as any traditional war. So we are going to see violence against women used as a weapon to control our voices, to control resources, and to silence women. So Joella, I think you can come in and talk about conflict and the intersection with climate change.
Je vais parler de la question liée à l'implication de jeunes et de femmes dans les zones où il y a des conflits. Pour nous, je pense qu'ils sont acteurs et victimes en même temps. Parce que quand il s'agit des questions des changements climatiques, questions d'exploitation des ressources naturelles, vous allez remarquer que ce sont des jeunes qui sont utilisés pour couper les arbres, pour détruire l'environnement. Et elles n'ont pas souvent le choix de le faire parce qu'ils cherchent à manger, ils n'ont pas de boulot, ils n'ont rien, ils n'ont pas même d'informations parce qu'ils se trouvent dans des endroits aussi très reculés avec moins d'informations par rapport à la question liée au genre, à la question liée à la sécurité du changement climatique. Donc tout ça, ça pousse le jeune à pouvoir chercher de quoi manger par rapport à l'exploitation des ressources naturelles. Vous allez remarquer même à cause des conflits armés, où il y a plus de 90% de jeunes qui sont actifs dans des groupes armés à l'Est. Bon, quand je parle de la RDC, à l'Est de la RDC, mais même au centre, il y en a beaucoup de groupes armés qui sont internes et externes au pays. Et bon, ce qui les préoccupe le plus, ce sont des arbres, par exemple. Ce sont des ressources naturelles et il y a des conséquences liées à l'environnement, liées aux ressources naturelles. Pourtant, si je parle de la RDC, c'est une parmi les pays qui est considérée comme le poumon de l'humanité, où les arbres doivent être protégés, où les espaces protégés doivent normalement, permettez-moi la tautologie, doivent être protégés par d'abord la population. Donc les conflits armés ont vraiment un lien très direct aux ressources naturelles, au changement climatique même. Et vous allez remarquer que ce sont ces gouvernements-là qui ont besoin des ressources du minerai qui le font, sachant même, et ils sont plus informés même par rapport à la population qui sont victimes de violences sexuelles parce que ce pays sont en train de chercher des ressources naturelles. Voilà pourquoi il y a beaucoup de recommandations qui sont liées sur l'information des jeunes, l'appui aux organisations de jeunes qui sont actifs au niveau rural, loin de la civilisation, parce qu'il y a certains territoires, si je prends par exemple en RDC, le territoire qu'on appelle Chabunda, c'est un territoire qui est très enclavé, tellement riche, mais il y a beaucoup de destructions de l'environnement qui se font là-bas, pas par la population. Moi, je peux dire la population parce que c'est elle qui est sur le terrain, mais il y a des personnes qui sont derrière et qui sont en train de les pousser à détruire l'environnement. Et vous allez remarquer qu'actuellement, il y a beaucoup d'organisations de jeunes qui sont en train de se forcer pour faire certaines activités, mais ils n'ont pas d'accompagnement. On se limite très souvent à appuyer des organisations qui sont dans des villes, dans des grandes agglomérations, mais on laisse les organisations de jeunes, des femmes qui sont au niveau des territoires. Il y a multiplicité aussi de violences sexuelles au niveau de ces territoires et ça ne permet pas aux femmes et aux jeunes de pouvoir assumer des postes de prise de décision parce qu'ils sont plus préoccupés par les problèmes liés à leur sécurité. Merci.
Thank you very much, Joella, for highlighting how the unsustainable use of natural resources and environmental degradation actually contribute to more conflict. And most of the time, these foreign forces actually take advantage of these conflicts. They fuel them so that they can take advantage of our natural resources, all in the name of providing aid or things like that. So it's important that we address environmental degradation before these forces come back and take what is left. So I think we'll invite Nefisa to talk about climate change and GBV. As we discussed earlier, climate change, the impacts of climate change also make women more vulnerable to sexual and gender-based violence. So could you explain to us these linkages? Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, climate justice is not really strange to Somalia. Is not strange to climate justice because there is a drought and flash rainfall, cyclones. Within last 3 years, there is a 2 cyclones comes back to Somalia, and while the drought effect and climate change affect women and girls, because of when they are fetching the water, when they are also, there is a lot of women who are the street vendors, and all of them, they are just facing a lot of GBV cases. As our experience in our network, we are advocating for the last 15 years to get the sexual offenses bill, and that bill, we just get the approval of the 2 houses and also the endorsement of the president in 2018. By the time that we are ready to implementation of the sexual offenses bill, there is some argument from the religious leaders and traditional leaders who just saying it includes some articles which is against the Islam. They are saying it's the marital rape, lesbians and guys, something like that, which is not include the bill because it is going all the 2 houses, and also we have hired the lawyers who are just working on the bill, and the constitution of the Somaliland also, which is referred the human rights instruments and also in Islam. So on that regard, still the rate of GBV and SGBV, it is increasing in all Somalia, and it is morely the most of them increasing the COVID-19 and also at the time of the drought. And the other issue which is related on this, it is insecurity in Somalia and the areas that Al-Shabaab, they have the role of that, because when it comes to drought, they are just the ones that who cannot afford all the humanitarian actors who can access to support the needed people and the animal. So that's why even the drought effect is in the areas of the Al-Shabaab. And also they recruit the young boys to extremists especially on the drought season. So this is the areas that they affect, and also related to GBV, and also the impact of climate justice.
Thank you very much, Nafisa. So could the panelists tell us what challenges have you faced in this work?
For us, when it comes to the government style, and I'm talking about all Somalia, although I'm from Somaliland, but I'm talking about all Somalia because women are same, they have same needs in every area, and there is no representation in women. For example, we have 2 houses. We don't have any upper house representative of women and lower house. It's 162, 64, and none of women. We have almost 36 ministers out of 3, 1 full minister and 2 deputy. And on that regard, we have a strong activist, women-led organizations and women activists who have that role, but our voice is not heard because of the less of government representations that we have. Because when it comes to that sexual offenses policy that I am talking about, none of women who are on the table, if they can have, they can work on it when the policy back to the houses. So when it comes to the leadership, we don't have. But as we engage the young female, both graduates and undergraduates, we open up a forum that we can invite a mentor that who can train them the way they can go on representation. Also, we engage and support the education, especially the university's fees that we can provide the youth, because education, economic, and representation are interlinked. So unless women cannot equip it educationally and economically, she cannot go rep. And in our regard, we have the democratization system, which is based on clan system. And clan always they nominate male rather than female.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to comment on the issue of representation, to say that we have realized over time that it's not just about putting more women in the spaces or more girls. It also matters the politics that these people stand for, because you may put someone there thinking, oh, okay, now women are being represented, and then they have this internalized patriarchy, and they are pushing the same agendas as the people who are already there, and so no change will happen. So it's important to support these young women, to make sure that their politics grows, that they develop in their work, so that when they reach in these spaces, they are pushing the right agenda and not just going with the rest of the house. So Mary, Fatia, and Joella, Esther, or Pereth, if you could tell us about the challenges you faced in the work, and also the work that your organizations are doing that maybe anyone here can decide to plug into and find out more about your work and how to support.
Yeah, currently towards environment, we are trying to just come in, because previously we've been mostly working on peace. But for the past 2 years, we saw that so many people have been impacted by the flood. And then what we do currently is supporting them, giving them psychosocial support, and ensure that women are supported, they are empowered, such that they are also empowered economically. So we give them some economic empowerment trainings, so that they can be able to at least come back and have something. Because when they are not economically empowered, they don't provide food. It's also one way that they are attributed to GBV at home, and they'll suffer the consequences. And then what else we do is, as young people, we try to sort of form a coalition of youth-led organizations, and then we ensure that at least every month we have a general cleaning for the country. We want to create that awareness that we need to keep our environment clean, because the drainage system is really bad, that when it rains, even children who are in classroom cannot come out of school. They will have to wait until it goes down for about hours and hours so that they will come out. So we try to educate people that if we keep our environment clean, if we try to advocate to the government that we need a proper drainage system. And what else we do is, as youth-led organizations, is we also try to make sure that we look into the budget, because there is the national budget. So we try to also look at the budget and train other youth to understand what the country budget is, because some people even don't know that the country has a budget that it's allocated to climate, that is allocated to youth, or allocated for women agendas. So we try to train the young people so that they are aware, and also they can push for these more budget allocations they can push for more budget allocations. So this is something that we do as youth-led organizations. So the initiative is called Nadafa Lebeledna, that we do every day, every month. And also we have the Let Girls Talk initiative that is found within the YWCA. It is an initiative created to give young women space so that they can discuss issues that affect them, and then together they can find solutions and try to see how they can collectively advocate, because it's not also easy to do advocacy in my country because of the political situation that is currently existing. So many young people, so many energetic feminists, and also the young men are now not within the country because they have tried to push, they have tried to raise their voices, and then they cannot again go back because of the political situation. So what we do is try to come together so that we are a big force, rather than doing it alone. So as women rights organizations, youth-led organizations, so we try to ensure that we do it together. So also the Let Girls Talk is an initiative of young women from different other women rights organizations and also at the grassroots level. And some of the challenges that we face is that most of our spaces as young people is being taken by the elder. Even when in the government positions, if a position is given to a young person, you see that the government has even tried to push the age limit for young people to be 40. So now when you're 40, you're a young person, so you can participate. So if in our position, so I thank the Oxfam and everyone who are able to bring us here. At least we will have also voice of the young people, because we are not sure who will be going on behalf of South Sudan, and will they represent the young people or not. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our time is almost up, so I'll give the floor to Joella and Florina to maybe give us some recommendations and critical next steps that we can take to enhance and platform young women, women from rural areas, poor women in these spaces.
En termes de recommandations que nous pouvons recommander, bon, en fait, nous avons cette chance-là au niveau de notre pays. Il y a ce qu'on appelle le Conseil national de la jeunesse. Donc, c'est un cadre qui a été mis en place par le gouvernement pour être le plus proche possible des jeunes, pour faire écouter la voix de la jeunesse et être le pont entre les organisations de jeunes et le gouvernement. Et au niveau de ma province, moi, je suis l'aînée, c'est une chance, je vous assure. Je suis l'aînée. En RDC, il y a 26 provinces. Et je suis la seule femme présidente de jeunes au niveau provincial. Et ça montre un exemple auprès des autres femmes par rapport d'abord aux questions liées aux ressources naturelles. Déjà, ça pousse les autres femmes à pouvoir prendre des décisions, à pouvoir les aider, parce qu'il y a ces problèmes, comme vient de le dire madame, les problèmes de mentorat. Il y a toujours des problèmes de conflits intergénérationnels. Quand il y a ces genres d'activités, ce sont souvent les mêmes personnes qui ont déjà eu beaucoup de formation, qui ont déjà eu beaucoup d'apprentissage par rapport à ça, qui viennent encore. Et puis il y a ces fissures entre les jeunes femmes qui ont des informations sur les questions du changement climatique, les informations sur le gender de femmes ou bien de filles qui sont encore dans l'école primaire, école secondaire. C'est un fossé, et voilà pourquoi on est en train de recommander à faire des activités pour boucler ce vide-là, essayer de faire relever autant de jeunes filles qui se trouvent au niveau primaire, secondaire, à intervenir sur le plan de gender, à prendre des décisions, à entrer dans la classe des personnes qui peuvent prendre des décisions sur les questions des changements climatiques. Et dans les zones où il y a des conflits, où il y a des femmes qui se font violer parce qu'elles doivent se déplacer de ces milieux où il y a des conflits armés, nous sommes en train de pouvoir recommander à ce qu'il puisse y avoir des décisions qui soient prises tant au niveau de notre pays qu'au niveau régional pour protéger les espaces, l'espace où il y a des ressources naturelles, parce que ce sera bénéfique pas seulement pour la RDC, mais aussi pour tout le monde entier, surtout pour l'Afrique, toute la région dans laquelle nous sommes. Troisièmement, nous sommes en train de recommander par rapport à l'infertilité des sols. Vous remarquerez que lorsqu'il y a des exploitations des ressources naturelles, on utilise des produits chimiques, des produits qui entrent dans le sol et qui font en sorte qu'ils ne puissent pas avoir la productivité, les sols ne puissent pas être productifs. Mais aussi, il y a certaines matières aussi qu'on jette dans des eaux. Ils font tuer des animaux, ça fait tuer les poissons, et ça amène la sécurité alimentaire. Et donc voilà pourquoi nous recommandons aussi, c'est qu'on puisse tenir compte vraiment de la protection des eaux, la protection des terres par les communautés qui se trouvent au-delà même de notre pays, afin que les populations soient protégées, pas seulement par les Congolais, par le pays où il y a les insécurités, mais aussi par la sous-région, pour qu'il puisse y avoir de la paix, et ça puisse aider à ce que les ressources naturelles soient protégées et que le changement climatique puisse vraiment diminuer.
Thank you very much. Florina, do you have some closing recommendations?
Tu as ajouté?
Alors, je voulais ajouter sur ce qu'elle a dit sur la formation de jeunes. On remarque surtout dans nos pays que les jeunes ne s'impliquent pas parce qu'ils ne sont pas informés. Nous avons eu à sensibiliser les jeunes au mois de mars sur leurs responsabilités face au changement climatique. Au début, dans 3 écoles différentes, au début, les salles étaient vides, en fait. Maintenant, on était obligé d'abord de les convaincre à l'extérieur pour les ramener dans la salle. Alors, quand ils ont compris les sujets, ils étaient très intéressés à apprendre et à faire des efforts pour contribuer, au fait, à prendre des responsabilités. Et j'étais très contente. Quand je suis retournée à l'une des écoles qu'on est passée, il y avait un groupe de jeunes qui se sont organisés pour mettre la propriété, d'abord commençant par leur propre école et sensibiliser d'autres jeunes pour faire de même. Donc moi, je crois qu'il faudrait renforcer la formation de jeunes et l'information aussi, donc plus de sensibilisation.
Merci. Bon, au-delà de ça, je voulais ajouter par rapport à la question de la jeunesse. Souvent, on remarque que les gens qui travaillent en solo, ils n'ont pas d'expérience, ils n'ont pas aussi des relations, mais ils travaillent de façon personnelle et ça ne leur permet pas de pouvoir évoluer. Nous sommes en train de faire en sorte que les jeunes qui sont dans les secteurs de transformation climatique, dans les questions de genre, puissent travailler en coopérative. Ils travaillent ensemble en réseau pour être aussi forts et bénéficier des opportunités qui se trouvent au niveau local et au niveau international.
Our time is up, so I think we'll close with Esther and Pereth. This report, the ILO report says if we don't close the gap in 210 years, it will take 210 years to close the gender gap if unpaid care work is not redistributed. So what policies do you think should be put in place, or what recommendations would you suggest in this regard?
Thank you, moderator. Just to give 2 recommendations in regards to unpaid care and domestic work. One of them is I would request government to reduce on the import taxes on the energy-saving equipment, such as washing machines, such as ovens, such as refrigerators. I mean, for these women not to spend a lot of time in the kitchen using firewood to cook, to make a meal, because we realize that, like Esther said, that women are cutting down trees to look for firewood, which is again an effect on climate change. Yeah, so if these women are able to use this energy-saving equipment, then their work would actually be reduced. Secondly is male engagement, because of the social norms, African men do not want to do unpaid care and domestic work. They believe that this is work for women. And these discussions never even happen during the business conversations or economic conversations, because they believe that unpaid care and domestic work is a feminist issue, which is not the case. Yeah, so if we engage men to understand what this work is, for them to appreciate, for them to recognize that this work actually is work and needs to be appreciated in one way or the other, then the burden would actually reduce. Thirdly, if we could embrace water harvesting technique. In a scenario where we have a long drought, women have no access to water. There are no taps. Remember, they have to walk a long distance to look for water. In a result that girls miss education, they miss school because they are looking for water. Quite a number of things. So in times when we have floods or heavy rains, can we harvest this water to be used during the dry season? Yeah, Because, for example, Karamoja is one of the dry regions in Uganda, and they have any way how they can harvest water. So if we could embrace water harvesting, it would be a very good way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Something important that I wanted to mention, but it escaped my mind earlier, was that climate change as well affects provision of public social services. And this includes education, the construction of schools, the teachers crossing from one place to another. So if we have weather changes in terms of flooding, that means that the bridges will be cut off, islands will be left on their own, therefore service provision becomes very, very difficult. And what does this mean? This means that the girl who would have gone to school because there is a school is not able to proceed to school. They will be forced to stay at home to continue with unpaid care and domestic work. And also the same applies to the hospitals and also availability of drugs and medication. So the same thing, if at all there is no proper medication or health facilities, it is still the women who are going to stay at home, nurse over children, and so the burden still continues and the conversation also continues. A recommendation, my colleague Perith has mentioned about water harvesting. In addition to that, the government also needs to invest into irrigation schemes or patterns, or even invest in greenhouses to make sure that climate change effects are mitigated. Recommendations are some of the challenges we are facing when it comes to addressing unpaid care is social norms and cultural norms as well. Many people still believe us, the women and the girls, are the ones who are supposed to be in the kitchen. We are the ones who are supposed to be cooking, as if for them, if the men cooked, their hands would fall off. So we are still struggling with the concept of unpaid care and domestic work. Lastly, recommendation is still, as my colleague said, government needs to invest more in agri-technology techniques. There is also need to promote urban smart agriculture, especially in the city center where the women don't have a lot of land. But if these women are further educated on how they can be able to grow crops vertically. I loved Judy's presentation, and I'm sure for Uganda, for it, it's a career way that she's able to help the women in the ghetto to do urban smart agriculture. So the government needs to do more in this, and also even us as civil society, we need to do more work to make this relevant. And lastly, is the government needs to promote and upgrade spring wells. For some of us who are here about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, when we had the unpaid care conversation here, some of you visited the spring wells. Spring wells is more of water from the ground. It is free. The water is always flooding. So if the government can be able to improve on some of those spring wells, actually those wells never dry up. Even if it's too hot, the spring wells are always there. So all we need is the government to be able to improve on them, to make them more safe for the women, and also to put sort of what do I say, like laundry facilities around, because the women, you find them washing from there, children are also bathing in that same place. So all we need is that the government realize that spring wells are very important. They actually can even be used in the time when the climates are very high. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panelists. So I think in closing, really what we can say is that what we need to challenge are the systems of capitalism that tell us that we have to maximize profits at any cost, at the cost of people and at the cost of the environment. And as she said before, women are the majority poor, so they rely the most on public resources. So we need to focus on financing our public services so that women do not miss out. And feminist intersectional approaches always center the most marginalized, who are women and girls. and other marginalized groups. So when people hear that a vulnerable community is being centered, they think that that means others won't get access to services. But the thing is, if the most vulnerable can access a service, that means even the most privileged person will have access to it. So that's why we center the most marginalized communities in this conversation. So I would like to thank our panelists. That was a beautiful conversation. And to everyone in the room for listening. If there are any questions for the panelists, we'll take them now, or additional comments on any of the topics that were discussed.
Mary, thank you very much for the work you're doing in South Sudan. I was inquiring, I'm just inquisitive. Everything you're talking about is the women, the women, the women. Are there any men supporting in this, or you're not involving them? Or are you involving them and they are not taking it up? That's what I was inquiring about.
Answer straight away. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, there are men who are there. Of course, within the organizations even, there are men who are there. But of course, the energy that they have to push for women issues is not the same, because they are actually not the ones facing these issues. So facing the challenges. So they are there, but of course they don't take it up seriously. So when I talk of positions given to women, or positions that are required for women, so the men would fight for it at that level, and then less or few position is only given to the women. So men are there. There are few who are really pro-feminist, but then also the energy is not that much. Yeah.
Is there, okay, there's a question on the back. Yes, you can use your mic.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's just a quick addition, and for purposes of emphasis, somebody talked about the fact that women are not homogeneous. In fact, somebody said how they wish somebody from the countryside was part of this. I think it goes even down for us to be challenged in our programming to say what kind of women do we want to get involved at the end of the day. Because when you look at the spectrum, you have young women, you have women that have gone to school, you have women that have not, you have women that are elderly, you have women that are single mothers. You know, it's a whole lot of, each one of them is affected differently. So in as much as possible, even when we are representing, even when we are doing programs, initiatives, I think we need to put that at the back of our minds. So I thank you so much for the sharing you've done.
Before you leave the podium, Patricia, you've done excellent work. I would actually think she's better than me, right? But you really did great. And I was enjoying your moderation skills. Also summarizing what people have said and all that. I think it takes a lot of really being very attentive. So a big applause to her. And because you've done a great job, the panelists were like, they want to just take a picture with you before you leave that podium. So can you please march there as we clap for you? Yeah. Okay, there are two, eh? Yeah, you can join. Bien, can you? Okay, I was only not applauding Patricia, Let us applaud all our panelists. They have done excellent work. Actually, we would stay here for another one day if Oxfam would allow. But then we have to leave, so I would really enjoy listening to the different conversations and the interesting opinions of the different panelists and stakeholders here. So, thank you very much. I think I shouldn't miss out. Let me just be like here. Shh. Okay, thank you so much. An applause for them, great ladies of the continent of Africa. And in the next 10 years when we are meeting, I think by then I will be almost going to my 50. 10 years from now, if I'm 37, next 10 years I'll be 47. Yes, ladies never say their age, right? They don't, eh? So for me, I've made 38 in June. And 10 years from now, I'll be how old? I'll be 48. Meaning that I'm still here to stay longer, to listen to new stories, and I will be meeting some people who will be saying I was inspired by Patricia, I was inspired in DRC by Joella, I was inspired by all of us in this room. So a big applause, you great ladies. So before we get to the next session, I want to invite our poet. Is she here? Yes. Just come and energize us a little bit. Let's clap for Beverly as she comes here. I remember that girl used to give me assignments, many things when I was still a student in Makerere University. And probably you really mentored me. That's how I'm here. And I have many mentees in this room. Beverly is one of them. Madam Jane Ochaye is one of them. Do you know her? Do you still remember her? She's there seated. Clap for her meanwhile. And then I have people whom I've moved with in my journey. I have Miriam there. We've moved together. Actually, I don't know her age. We might be, I think I'm older than you a little bit. But we've moved together from student to youth and all that. I have Edwin. Edwin has gone out. But almost in this room, summarily, Collins is my friend also. There, you stand up and I see you. Yes. But for him, he was young. Bambi is grown up. And then, of course, I will not forget Jackson. I will not forget Titi. Is Titi there? I know she doesn't even want to stand up. Yeah, she went outside. So whenever you get to a place where you meet people whom you have moved with, you just clap for them. Of course, I will not forget the Honorable who has just come in, Honorable Kaya Christine. So clap for all those people I've known before. And now I've added all of you to my buffet. So over to you, Beverly.
Thank you, Honorable. Honorable Minister and distinguished guests, good morning. Good afternoon, actually. I come with a delegation of young climate change activists. If they could come here, and you will read for me the word that you see. What word is that you see? Oh no. Put it up. All right, what word is that? Again, please. Excellent. The word is choices. And this creative presentation is about how our individual choices interact with climate change, whether or not you're aware of it. Towards the end of last year, just as my eldest daughter turned 13, she was invited for a sleepover. I do not advocate sleepovers at all, but this lady who invited her over and her daughter, they're British, and the British and Americans are so keen on sleepovers. That's how they engage in friendship. You come and spend a night. The husband is a relative of mine. As she went, I told my friend, she's called Sam, I said, Sam, Zion, my eldest daughter, has just started her periods. So is it possible for you to just take her to a pit latrine where she may dispose of the used pads? Sam kept quiet. And that was a unique interaction of climate change. What do you think Sam's response was to that? She was against the idea, but why do you think that was? She was against the idea of my daughter using pads. Why do you think that was? They're non-biodegradable. That was an interaction that I had with climate change so unique to my own experience that I had no idea about. And yet somehow I was aware. She said, you must use disposable cups. I was like, you must be out of your mind. How possible is it? I just thought of all the scenarios that could go wrong until I watched a YouTube video of hers where she explained, she even sang a song about how we as women from the age of 12 or 13 to when we reach menopause, late 40s or early 50s, are actually contributing to climate change with this unique experience that we go through every month. So go home and think about that. Don't point fingers there. Look around your home and your own situation, how you are contributing. You have a choice to learn more about it and learn how you can then reduce on the effects of climate change from your own experience every month. Choices. I'm going to narrate a story and you will decide how the story ends. Choices. There is a 20-year-old university student at Uganda Christian University in Mukono. She is an advocate for climate change, is passionate about it, and she has been invited to Eldoret University for 6 months for a climate change exchange program. Highly funded. She's excited. Boards on the bus, Mashpoa, from Kampala to Eldoret. As she arrives at the border, as you know, at the border by bus or car, there are people who exchange money. Any border, even when you're going to Rwanda, Tanzania, there are always people who exchange money. And here was a lady asking her if she could exchange her money from Uganda shillings to Kenya shillings. The lady had a baby, probably about 1 year, who was on the ground on a mat drinking water from a polythene bag. Sometimes in Uganda and other places, they sell drinking water in a polythene bag. She was also selling boiled maize, all right? If you are the person, the student, who was on your way for a climate change workshop at Eldoret University, would you, the first choice is, would you offer to buy water for the young baby? Would you walk away and say, it's not my problem, just get your money and go? Or would you actually give the lady money to buy her own water and food for the child? So you have 3 choices, and I want to hear from you now. 1, would you go and buy water for the child yourself? Would you give the lady money to buy it herself? Or would you just exchange your money and say, it's not my problem, I'm going for a climate change workshop? Off I am to Eldoret. So anyone can answer. Pick one. Choices. Yes, please tell me your name and then share your example. Is there a roving microphone, please? Is there a microphone that can be passed around? All right, no, there isn't. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Maybe my answer would be a little different because I don't think I would just give money to her.
Yes.
Because even then when I give her money without sensitizing her,
yes,
she may not use the money for buying water.
Great.
So first I would tell her that, you see, this polythene is not good for the health of the young baby.
Yeah.
And as we are trying to fight climate change impacts, the polythene bag after will be disposed of in a way that will impact on our environment. Then I'll give her the money to buy the water, or I would buy the water for the baby myself.
All right, so let's just say you went and bought the water, all right? So this wonderful student decides, I am going to be an advocate for change. Let me buy water from a bottle that is recyclable so that this lady understands how unsanitary it is to use polythene. So she goes to buy the water. As she goes to buy the water, you know the border can be crazy, because sometimes places are demarcated, you go from one end to the other, so she had to look for the water. None of the shops were selling water. She went on walking until finally she found a place that had water. Now that place was selling water in Kenya shillings. Remember, she hadn't yet changed her money. What a bother. She kept asking, I don't have Kenya shillings. It's only 5 shillings. She didn't have it at all. She only had Uganda shillings. She did not even have dollars. Until finally, someone said, you know what, here's 5 shillings, take it, take the water. So she goes, runs, it's a long distance, goes to give the lady her water, then gets her own money. What a kind deed. After that, she realizes the bus has left her. The bus has left her. This kind deed, they say no kind deed goes unpunished. The bus has left her. That was a good deed, though. The bus has left her. What does she do? She has 3 other choices. 1, she asks the lady, listen, can I spend a night at your place? Or she waits for a matatu. There are matatus at the border that often go with at least 2 seats across to Eldoret. So what does she do? Take the matatu, or does she decide to spend a night at the lady's place? Another choice. What do we do? Does she spend a night, or should I just wait for a matatu and go? Yeah, life isn't simple. It never is. Anyone wants to try? What does she do? Does she wait for a matatu, or does she ask the lady to spend a night at her place with her son? Please speak up.
I said I'll wait for the matatu.
Excellent. So now we have agreed we are going in the matatu. As she goes in the matatu, she is seated next to somebody. And the person says, I saw what you did with that lady. Let me tell you, that lady is a prostitute. We stopped helping her. That child is not even hers. She always brings that child, puts the son down there. Husband even left her because she's a prostitute. You shouldn't have helped her. She goes on to Eldoret. As she arrives at the university, she's at the climate change workshop, and she tells them her experience. This is what her students tell her. We're not really interested. Listen, we're just here to have fun. They've given us great allowance. Climate change is not real. Join us and have fun. After all, they're paying us good allowances. We're staying in this wonderful guest house. Again, choices. We interact with climate change every day.
Thank you so much. The choices we take and the choices we make. So let us clap for Beverly and the team. Now I would like to invite the host for the next session. Next session should take us like just 10 minutes. Then we go for our communique, because that's a very important session. It will summarize whatever we've been doing in this room. So may I therefore take this moment to invite this great lady of Uganda, of Africa, who will take us through, who is a communications influencer in the continent, and she's none other than Dora Itunga. Dora Itunga, are you there? It's an online presentation. Pardon? Okay. She's not there. Okay. So we are going direct to the communique. Okay, so we're doing well with time, actually. That is good news now. Is it good news? Really? I thought you wanted to continue enjoying Uganda for a little more time. Oh, in this very room. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been here for 3 days now, and we've been taking note of each and everything from day one. And of course, you know the theme of our being here. There is nothing for us without us. For the next COP, we don't need to be left out. So we want our views to be fed into the global discussions that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. We call this a pre-COP event organized by young people in Uganda, but for the continent. May I therefore, ladies and gentlemen, ask you to applaud the team that was put in place to put down the communique. And before we receive the communique from the young people, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, introduce to you one of my longtime friends and a legislator in the Republic of Uganda, a holder of a master's in land use and regional development. She's a fellow environmentalist, since I'm also an environmentalist. She also has a bachelor of environment management from Makerere University. That was my first degree as well. She has been a coordinator of the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change. And that's a forum which I started in the 9th Parliament, in the Parliament of Uganda. But she has championed a lot of activities in the Parliament of Uganda, including the recently enacted Climate Change Act of the Republic of Uganda. Out of the 55 countries, Uganda became a priority, a pilot country. She's a member of the Green Climate Fund Designated Committee. She is the director for African Coalition on Green Growth, where I'm also a member. She has coordinated so many parliamentary engagements, including and not limited to parliamentarians' engagement in energy legislation on the renewable energy global coordination. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Honorable Christine Kaya, who is a minister. And she's the woman member of parliament for Chiboga district. Those of us who come from Uganda, you know where Chiboga is. It's in central part of Uganda. And she is going to be our guest in the closure of this particular event. However, before I invite the young person to make a presentation of the communique, I would also like to bring to your attention, Honorable Christine. By the way, in Uganda we have the ruling government and the opposition government, and they are all recognized by our law. Whereas we did not get the Minister of Water and Environment, we have our shadow minister for water and environment, and that's none other than Honorable Christine Kaya. It's also her title. I would like to bring to your attention that these young people gathered here are coming from the different parts of the continent. We have Kenya, we have Zambia, we have Rwanda, we have Ethiopia, we have South Sudan. I expected to say, woo! Are we tired? Okay, I'm gonna start afresh, right? Okay, we have Kenya. Yes, I know Kenyans for that. We have Ugandans. I know Ugandans, they are always not bothered. We have Since I'm a Ugandan, I can make any comment. But don't take it seriously. We have Ethiopia. Yes, led by Jordan El Shaddai. We have Rwanda. Oh, Sharon left. And we have Zambia. Zambia, oh yeah. And then we have South Sudan. And then we have Somalia. And then we have DRC Congo. And then which other country have I mentioned? Zimbabwe should be here. Oh, okay. Christina. Okay, let us all clap for ourselves. Yes. So in summary, those are the countries that are in here. And I know representing the rest of the other countries that are not mentioned. And basically, we have been talking about, if you read the write-ups there, no climate justice without gender justice. And I know you are one of those feminists, those people who are gender advocates. And I basically, Jacqueline Amongi, because of the work I know that you do on a daily basis on climate-related issues, I applaud you. And when I applaud you, everyone else must applaud her. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to invite the communique team to come and present to us our summary of our 3 days being in Uganda and in Mestil. Can I have the team come? Yes, that clap is good as they walk in front. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. You can even say it. I don't know how, whatever way you want to present the communique.
Hi, everyone. All protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, and all climate justice champions here, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Stella Nderito. I was part of the team working on the communique, and I would like to ask all the members who sat in the communique team to kindly stand. Would like to honor you, and please join us here. We are not all of us, are we? I think there are 2 more people. Mary and Sharon. Are they here? Oh, they've left, okay. All right. Yeah, so. Again, on behalf of this team, I would like to appreciate all of you and acknowledge your contribution in this statement. So kindly, please give yourself a round of applause. And we tried within the best of our ability to make sure that we incorporated all the feedback that you shared during all our discussions. And we hope that after reading this communique, you will then be able to share with us feedback on the additions and subtractions that we should have on the document so that it's a reflection of everything that we've discussed here, right? All right. So I'm just going to read the introduction, and then I will invite Miriam, and then Jodahi, and then Javwa to read through. So please take note of what we read. Communique by young feminists in the Heka region pre-COP27. We, climate justice and gender justice champions from the Heka region, meeting through the Young Feminists convening pre-COP27 in Kampala, Uganda, held from 24th to 26th August 2022, representing the grassroots communities and climate justice champions from our region, convened on a common agenda of climate justice through a gender lens, challenging deeply rooted systems of oppression on African girls, women, and youth, which have been enabled over decades of structural patriarchy. As young people in the region, we are concerned about the continued prioritization of profits over people and the planet. Worst of all, the impacts of climate change are not gender neutral. The lucrative, exploitative activities that destroy our environment disproportionately affect girls and women and rob them of dignified lives. We demand from all national, regional, and global stakeholders deliberate investments centered on gender-just and youth-led climate-just initiatives. There is no climate justice without gender justice and the youth.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to read the Heka region. The presented Heka region is 6.34 million kilometers, is made up of 8 countries. That is DRC, which is 2.34 million kilometers, Ethiopia, which is 1.112 million kilometers, Kenya, which is 582,646 kilometers, Rwanda, which is 26,338 kilometers, South Sudan, which is 644,329 kilometers, Somalia, which is 633,655 kilometers, Zambia, which is 752,614 kilometers, and Uganda, which is 241,038 kilometers, is made up of various ecosystems, which including water bodies, mountains, grasslands, forests, arid and semi-arid lands, among other natural resources. Most of the region's inhabitants are settled in rural parts of the countries, with most highly dependent on agricultural activities. The region is also known for numerous movements within and across the borders in search of livelihood and peaceful settlement, mostly caused by climate change-related challenges. So the key issues and messages: we have experienced firsthand and take great concern in extreme weather patterns caused by climate change in our communities, including drought, heat waves, extreme cold, landslides, flooding, and rain fluctuations. These have resulted in extremely challenging conditions such as chronic diseases, death, displacement of our people, food and water shortage, loss of livelihood, great gender-based violence, child marriages, destruction of land, discontinued learning, conflict, malnutrition, among others. This constituently disrupt young people's development and our contributions to nature building. The demographic most affected by climate change is the most ignored and unheard. The voices of African girls, women, and young people in climate change and possible solutions are not heard nor adopted on the global stage. Instead, we are expected to adhere to the global north. The global north solutions, this locks out the contribution of marginalized groups in climate action. This causes the extreme change in weather puts women and girls in more vulnerable situations in their lives, leading to more gender-based violence, that is GBV, intimate pattern violence, and other types of violations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jodahe. I'm going to be continuing about the key issues and messages. So follow through. And I just want to say I'm very happy to be part of this team and part of this event. So, of course, they're going to start me off with men are leaving their rural homes to earn a living in urban areas, hence increasing the burden of unpaid care work on women, which in turn limits women's development and their participation in leadership spaces, where decisions on climate actions are made, leaving out solutions by women for women and critical local voices and indigenous knowledge. There are knowledge hierarchies on climate justice, mostly from global north, that do not factor in the solutions from the global south. As a result, domestication of adopted commitments is limited in our countries with little or no ownership by women and young people. Girls' education is greatly affected due to the climate impacts such as poverty and drought, given the gender roles that require them to do domestic work at expense of their schoolwork and development, and patriarchal beliefs that view girls as source of wealth. Rural and poor households, who are the majority of our region, still greatly rely on firewood for energy, leading to depletion of forests, increased unpaid care work, and chronic illnesses such as respiratory illnesses. Water fluctuations and lack of proper waste management cumulatively lead to numerous illnesses such as diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, and child mortality, and so many more. There is limited recognition of environmental and climate champions and change makers by the government and global convenience. Conservation areas such as natural forests, wetland, and wildlife are highly threatened by poachers, charcoal producers, and timber business owners. And lastly, governments in the global south are licensing foreign and some local businesses owners that destroy our natural resources, which we are committed to conserve. The lack of climate action policies and other legal frameworks, as well as the implementation by governments, is injustice to the planet and our lives. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Njavwa Teresa Bwadia, and I'm so excited to be given the opportunity to read the recommendations. After much discussion, we make the following demands. The first one, make climate actions inclusive by investing in meaningful participation of girls, women, youth, and the people and the persons with disabilities, especially in the global south, minority, marginalized, and indigenous communities, such as in the global convening like the COPs. Unify climate action policies, legal frameworks, political commitments across the region that speak to gender and the youth inclusion to harness the region's efforts in combating climate change. Educate and inform women and young people on climate issues in their environment, and most importantly, learn from them the solutions they propose in fighting climate change. They should be able to collect and disseminate data on climate change within their communities. Invest in women, especially rural women. More funding and technical support must be directed to women-centered organizations, cooperatives, associations, or groups to improve environmental sustainability and resilience to climate change. Build capacities of women in arid and semi-arid countries on gender-responsive approaches to natural resource management and conflict resolution. Revise foreign investment policies to favor our ecosystem by stopping foreign investments that destroy our natural resources and mandating other eco-friendly investments to finance community-led environmental regenerative projects by plowing back their profits in our countries for climate actions. Humanize the effort of climate change. The realities of how many women, children, youth, and persons with disability in the global south are extremely affected by drought, heat waves, flooding, which lead to loss of income, malnutrition, displacement, and chronic illnesses. Finance climate justice initiatives as committed in the Paris Agreement. We want just reparations from the global north. Financing climate action is not, I repeat, is not a matter of aid or charity, but justice. Produce and disseminate simplified local information, education, and communication materials on climate change, especially in rural communities, and provide translation and interpretation resources for all inclusion. Integrate environment, and climate change in primary, secondary, and informal learning institutions, curricula for learners, engagement in combating climate change. Additionally, incorporate mentorship among women and girls to achieve their completion of education. Government in the Heka region to prioritize facilitating feminist climate movements and organization as key climate action actors. Train national policymakers, that's national and subnational, on feminist climate action and approaches for regional and international influencing to ensure that policies speak to our needs as African girls, women, and the youth. Allocate funding for initiatives that integrate equitable and gender-responsive financing to enable women and girls to recover from the impact of climate change and actively monitor these funds. Deliberate country efforts to domesticate international commitments and recommendations on gender and climate action at country level and create action plans for follow-ups. Finance youth-led and owned eco-friendly entrepreneurship and knowledge exchange in the Heka region through training, experiential learning, mentorship, and incubation initiatives. This must include women, youth, and persons with disability in minority and marginalized communities. Resource youth innovations aimed at developing ICT mobile technologies for disseminating gender and climate justice action. Oblige regional bodies like the African Union to compel government in countries with natural resources to take specific measures for elimination of armed conflicts and protect populations and natural resources. Monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning impacts of climate change must be looked at through a feminist lens. Feminist participatory action approaches to climate justice should be integrated into the methodologies and designs of action plans for climate action. As part of the meal, conversations must also focus on evaluation of information on the differentiated impacts of climate change on women and men, with specific attention paid to local communities and the indigenous people. Maybe before I hand over the mic, this was long, and this shows how we have so many problems. We're hoping that when we prepare for COP28 or 29, we'll not have so many issues to address and so many recommendations.
Okay, by show of hands, has the drafting team done great? By show of hands. By show of hands. Have your issues been addressed? So let's give them a big applause. I even like the way they decided that one presents on this, the other presents on the other. And so our recommendations are clear and our communique will get into the right places. And I know that by having Honorable Christine here, some of these issues will get into Parliament. And I know she attends every COP. And I know that some of these issues will continue to be addressed at different forums. And also, as you get to your countries, don't hesitate to make presentations to your leaders, as this is a Kampala declaration on young people's gathering prior to the COP. So thank you so much. I would like to call upon Mr. Edward, who is going to be the acting country rep of Oxfam, to come and give some remarks, and then later invite Honorable Christine Kaya to give her remarks, and then officially have this meeting closed. You're welcome, sir. That clap, eh? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my name's actually, are they names or it's a name? Edward Mwebaze Sendide. And I do work for Oxfam as the head of programs. And of course, I can also be the acting director since he has left. Yeah. Just to appreciate our Honorable Kaya for being present, even if you may not have been able to be with us all the 3 days, but we appreciate the commitment that you have and you continue to show. And indeed, you are representing also the Minister for Environment as the Shadow Minister. So we appreciate you. I will just say a few words. I want to, of course, also state that I'm also a climate activist in my own way. Having been also a humanitarian person, I'm very concerned about humanitarian preparedness and response. And there is quite a lot of implication from what you have already said, and of course what we know about our region here. There is quite a lot of challenges to do with the climate. You may say now, Uganda, we fondly call ourselves as the Pearl of Africa. But the Pearl is also threatened. You have heard recently we have lost, I don't remember how many people in Karamoja due to climate-related challenges. There is a food insecurity situation there due to climate. And also conflicts as well, conflicts with our neighbors, South Sudan, Kenya, which sometimes are largely related to the resource use, sharing the limited resources as the climate change impacts significantly on these communities. So the analysis I have seen in your communique, it shows that actually you have had an opportunity to synthesize, to look at some of these issues as they relate to the issues of women, girls, and young people. And indeed, this forms the biggest population that we have in most of these countries. And it means if the youth and the women are not engaged are not participating, are not in decisions that impact them from a climate perspective, it means almost all the communities are at risk, because this forms the biggest population. And the few of you who have come and had this dialogue and analyzed the issues further and recommended, want you to go back and engage more the groups that you have left at home, the different women, youth-led organizations, the different networks that need to act in their own small way, either to do something to prevent to address the issues of natural resource degradation, but also to take action in terms of influencing policymakers at that level. So don't, as already stated, make sure that some of these actions you are coming up with are able to reach all those policymakers at your different levels, the ones you interact with. But also when the time for the COP27 comes, make sure that you represent us in a big way, in a big numbers in Egypt, and ensure that actually this critical group is supported. In terms of funding, I know that we are always talking about damage and loss and they are increasing in Africa, but I don't hear a lot of funding and funding mechanisms that are being prepared or are in place really to support some of these communities in terms of responding to situations. And I hope it is strong in your recommendations in terms of funding. We need to ensure that at least even our own countries can budget and include these funds in their national or local government budget, because there is something they can do. They don't have to rely on donations all the time. At least countries should spare some resources to address climate change impact. But when we come to the global, discussions, also we want to ensure that they have significant funding mechanisms that can support us to be able to address issues of loss and damage. And so I want to appreciate the contributions that you have made throughout the week. And we want to, before we close this workshop, I want to first to invite our honorable member of parliament, who is also the shadow minister for environment, to say something to you, because she is an activist. She has worked in different contexts, and in fact I have also worked with her on similar matters of climate change before. So she has quite a wealth of knowledge to share with you, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite her to say something, and then we shall come back and close the workshop. Thank you very much.
Am I audible enough? Okay. I greet you all in Jesus' name. Amen. I know there are some Muslims here. I also greet you all in Allah's name. I am very privileged to be here. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers. I do not want to dwell very much in the introductions have been introduced, but the other part that was not introduced is that I am a member of the Climate Change Committee of Parliament and also a member of the Natural Resources Committee of Parliament. And based on the 2020 IPCC report that encouraged us to focus on the issues of I was still continuing with the introductions that I belong to those committees, and based on the 2020 IPCC report on climate change, they advised us to mind about the effect of land management, land tenure security in sustainably keeping our environment safe. And when I looked around in Uganda, many of us were battling with the issues of land tenure, land management, land governance, land dispute resolution. When you look at most of the ecosystems that have been destroyed, it is because of land tenure issues. They gave us a report on the reasons why biggest chunks of forests are being cleared, and it was because of selfish challenges, but still because of 60% because of land tenure issues. So every climate change activist was requested to do something as far as land security, land tenure security is concerned, such that all the adaptation practices, mitigation practices, and other well-researched